You're listening to What Would Jesus Tech? A conversation about how to glorify God using the technology that we have in the world that we live in, among many other things. My name is Austin. I am the social media manager for the Gospel Coalition, and I am joined today by Joel Jacob, who is secretly the greatest AI engineer that you've never heard of, designing just the most amazing things that makes ChatGPT look super basic by comparison. Joel, what have you been cooking as of late?
I wish that was what my claim to fame could be. But we are working with a lot of digital transformation for industries. And we definitely are using AI. The biggest thing I was sharing is about robotics. I'm super hype about robotics and embodied AI. We've talked about it a bunch on this podcast before, and we don't need to go into this tangent right now. But I did just see NVIDIA talk to Sequoia Capital about their strategy on getting enough training data to teach the AI how to be embodied in a robot. But another story for another day.
So are you telling me that we are about to have droids in Star Wars? We're about to have K2SO, where spoilers for Andor. If you have not seen episode 8 and 9 of season 2, Cassian destroys a droid, takes it back with him. They plant a new AI in him, more or less. Like, are we about to be in that kind of world, or is this something different?
The phrase "is it about to be" is maybe debatable, but that is really like the consensus goal that the tech community is building towards. Yeah, okay, not to spoil it, but it's a cool topic. So in the LLM world, they talk about MCP, model context protocols, or other ways of like interacting agents for agentic frameworks. So in this latest chat, they talked about a physical API. So obviously there's like software APIs to be like, hey, I want to like create this. I'm going to use APIs. And a physical API would be like you tell machines to build it. And that framing is crazy, and it could one day be a cliche of you got to tap into the physical API.
Clichés. That's, I think, something we should talk about in this episode today. I actually want to bring up one. I think you said at the start. I'm gonna ask you if this is a cliche or if this is a genuinely a genuinely true and helpful statement. You said when you were talking about your work, you used the term digital transformation. Is that a cliche?
I think it is.
What does it mean? First of all, what does that term even mean?
So in the business world, right? You have all these companies that were using processes and systems that are analog. Analog is a precursor to digital. Mm-hmm. You're thinking like. I'm thinking like even like light bulbs using current as opposed to like LEDs, incandescent to LEDs. Maybe that's not the best example, but like pencil and paper as opposed to typing, right? So you're like writing, and it's analog. And the expectation is by switching to the newer modern stack, you gain advantages of speed or less cost or whatever it is. And there are several companies who are like, how do I go from where I am now to where all these other people have pioneered or where they're leading? And that's the whole concept of like transform digitally.
Yeah.
And then obviously by industry, it's going to vary. I'm focused in digital transformation for more like industrial companies where you think of like these old factories. A lot of them are super analog and they're not like super digital. And then you think about Amazon warehouses where it's like there are robots moving everything around rather than just people, right?
Okay. So going off of tech cliches, is the term tech bro a cliche? Would you say is that a cliche in your world?
Yeah, I think it's peaking. And as we kind of like break down like cliche, it really does come from some sort of insight, right? It's like,
There's a kernel of truth to it. Like
yeah,
it's talking about, it's getting at something.
yeah, and it's like, okay, there are a group of people who are casual. They wear hoodies. They like, use the stand-up desk. They think that tech is going to solve all these problems, and they have like, unique jargon. There's like hustle culture, and
Hmm.
there is like a persona there. But then it kind of like just becomes a general term for anyone who's like in tech, who's like, oh,
Right.
I'm just like coding, and it becomes like oversimplified. And obviously, that's like the bad part about cliches. It like oversimplifies in general.
Yeah, it takes something that's legitimate and useful and it stretches it out so much that it can be used for everything, which means it ends up being useful for nothing.
Yeah. So tech bros, though, I think even like the tech bro community is like embracing it. Obviously, there are like other, let's say, cliches that turn into like negative stereotypes, right?
Hmm.
But I think this one, people are like, tech bros are running with it and being like, yeah, like the tech bro in SF will never understand the tech bro in New York, and it's like
Right.
now you're like breaking the cliche down into like regional tech bros and different nuances in culture and stuff like that. But it's definitely, yeah, it's definitely a cliche that is popular. I think even more so, with the recent election, it's like the tech bros went right, so it's
Yeah.
like
Right.
used in the sort of like, oh, how do we speak about a people group generally? And it's like there is
Hmm.
some value in like being able to communicate an idea of this type of person
Yeah.
has now changed to this type of behavior, but obviously it's a
Yeah.
oversimplification.
So let's keep going with some cliches in your world, and then here in a minute, I want to turn the tables and you grill me on some ministerial cliches. Is vibe coding, is that a cliche, or is that a helpful term?
It's like it's a newer cliche. I think it builds upon like previous cliches. So, um, what it is, let's start with that. Vibe coding is you're using a chat assistant to generate code, and you prior to the old way where you're like, okay, I know exactly what I'm writing. You ask the machine,
Yeah.
and you don't really know. You're kind of like, we'll just figure it out, see where it goes, and like then people say like, I vibe coded this. I like just leaned into the AI and like created something. Um, and I do think like there was a previous term like growth hacking that isn't exactly the
Ah.
same thing, but
Okay.
it was like, okay, we're gonna try and like achieve some outcome by like taking some shortcuts, right? Which is
Right.
a little bit of the essence of like vibe hacking. And almost like as I thought about it, it's like this highlights even a more like Machiavellian philosophy of the end justifies the means, where it's like, okay,
100%.
like we didn't get it the standard way or the right way, but we got there, and that's what matters.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting kind of like double click, if that's not another
Oh,
cliche.
let's talk about double click. Oh my goodness, what a perfect example. Is that a cliche?
Yeah, there's like, and I think so. There's tons of cliches. I think even earlier we were talking about another one. It's like, oh, let's take it offline, right? It's
Yeah. Oh
another
yeah.
cliche. It's very common in the business world, and it does come from like now we're on this online segment, so we're gonna take it offline and talk in real life in person
But
about.
it's funny though, like, because I hear this pretty often, like in a remote work context, and like you don't actually take it offline because most of us work uh quite a bit of distance away from each other. Like we just go from maybe a Zoom call to like a phone call or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah,
So
exactly.
we're not actually taking it online offline. We're taking it just to a different place online.
Yeah, which is, yeah, so interesting. Like the original meaning is probably like let's actually take it offline. And
Yeah.
now it's almost like let's talk about this outside of the meeting.
That I think is what the phrase is like trying to capture. Like let's do this outside of the meeting that we're currently having.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. They're useful in like conveying a concept in a short phrase so that people can understand, but then, like these other euphemisms they often get like taken out of context. And I wonder
Yeah.
like in the ministry world, what would you say are like the really common ones? Like, thinking back to when I would talk to people, let's say in Christianese,
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
were like, oh, I feel led or God God's prompting me,
Yeah,
believing for.
Oh, it's tough. It's tough because, like, so as someone who is a reformed Christian, somebody who kind of who lives and works in the reformed evangelical space, the things that I would consider Christianese or Christian cliches are probably different from what you hear in the rest of the American Christian landscape. Reformed evangelicalism is not the smallest subset of American Christianity by any means, but we're by no means as big as Catholics or Pentecostals or Baptists or things like that. So, you know, in the outside my world, you know, one thing I think is a pretty common cliche would be something like "let go and let God." That's it. Just let go and let God.
I would say that when I was younger, for sure.
Okay, so you know it. Yeah,
and I think it's true, right?
Right, that's the thing, is that there is an element of truth to this, where like we need to stop trying to like white knuckle our control of things and trust that God is at work. Where I've heard it used, and maybe this is true for you too, is that it becomes this kind of like magic hand wave for doing something in your own like capacity, in your own power. It's ironic that I hear that most as a Reformed Christian, as a Calvinist. It is ironic that I hear that phrase most often in non-Calvinist contexts, who tend to not hold the same view of the sovereignty of God that I hold.
So this is really interesting. So in your circle, you would say that "let go and let God" is a placeholder for "I'm gonna do my thing." But
I would say let go, let God. I would say let go and let God is don't worry about it. You don't have to do anything. God, like, stop trying to do anything. God's going to take care of it for you. And my pushback to that would be no. Actually, like, we have agency, and we are commanded to work and to act in the circumstances we find ourselves in. Most people don't associate Calvinists with saying that because we're big on the sovereignty of God, and so it's like, well, if you're a Calvinist, you know, you don't believe in free will. Not true at all. Calvinists are perfectly fine with free will. And so it's an interesting cliche, because it's like I hear it in spaces where in the same breath, people would not agree with my view of the sovereignty of God. So that's what makes it fun.
I think that one transcends between like different denominations. Like, you know, even like it's almost in the Sunday Christian culture or like holiday Christian culture of like Jesus take the wheel. You know,
yeah,
like,
okay, there we go.
It's like every Christian understands that kind of phrase of like, even like non-Christians. Like, God is in control.
I mean, to be fair, Jesus Take the Wheel is the name of like one of the like highest, but one of the most well-known country songs of the 2000s. I mean, it's one of Carrie Underwood's like greatest hits. Transcended the country music genre. So it's a cliche, but it also like came from a piece of art. No comment on Carrie Underwood's music being art. Let's keep going. Something I hear in my world. So let's get into like my world of cliches.
Niche cliches.
Niche cliches. We are all about seasons of life in my world. Everything is a season.
We use that term. I use that term.
And which again,
just a season.
It's just a season. Like which Kernel of Truth, like Ecclesiastes 3. That's the whole point of Ecclesiastes 3, or at least for the first major section of it. There's a season for everything and a time for every activity under heaven, and it's good to apply that to life. The problem is that like it becomes like the default lens for viewing everything, to the point like, okay, well, if everything is a season, is it actually a season? Is it possible to have a season that's not a season?
Yeah, that's probably what draws the ire of people saying cliches, is like it almost seems dismissive, right?
Yeah,
it's like you're going through a tough time, blah blah. Oh, it's just a season of life, which can be true. Obviously, it's like in your looking back on your life, there are different seasons, but people might feel like, oh, it's a little bit dismissive for you to just call it a season and be done with it,
right. Like it's fine to call some things seasons, but it would come across a little insensitive to take maybe the worst thing you've gone through in your life, or the most challenging trial you've ever faced, and to reduce it down to just being a season. Like, is that true? Maybe at one level, yes, but if everything is a season, it flattens everything out to where, the ordinary, normal rhythms of life and the truly climactic, disaster, life-altering moments of life just kind of get washed out together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even in my own life, I've used the concept of a season to even minimize probably the impact of, an event or something as like a bad season, like winter. Listen, like I hate winter.
Yeah.
I've been trying to move south for a long time. And it's like, okay, I'm just going through winter. And then it's like, yeah, you have the analogies of winter doesn't last forever, these type of things. But it like helps in that framework minimize obviously the extent of what it could be.
Yeah, as someone who lives, I mean, I don't deal with Canadian winters. I don't have to deal with what you guys have to deal with, probably. But Texas Panhandle winters are brutal in their own way. We get Denver weather most of our winters, and so our winters are usually very cold and involve a lot of snow. And I hate the winter. Winter is my least favorite time of the year by far. So saying it's like, it won't be winter forever. It's like, that's true, but that doesn't exactly help when I've got 3 more months of it.
Here's another one that I think, and I might be interested to hear your like theological take on it, which is similar to adversity, dealing with adversity, is God won't give you more than you can.
I hate that phrase. I absolutely hate that phrase. I hate that phrase because, one, it's not scriptural. It's not scripturally true at all. It's based on a misreading of a passage in 1 Corinthians where God will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But that's a different conversation. Temptation is a different discussion than trials and circumstance and situations. And there are repeated moments, even in scripture, where God does give more than people can handle, intentionally so that they repent and return and cry out to him. God will not abandon you to despair. God will not cast you off and forsake you, but he may actually lead you to a point where your only response is to throw your hands and say, I can't do this anymore. God, you must rescue me from this situation. That's happened to me. That's happened to everyone I know as a Christian. And so the notion that like God's not going to give you anything more than you can handle makes you the center of the story, when God actually does let us go through things that push us beyond our limits and show us that we're not God, that we can't do everything, that we can't save ourselves from our circumstances.
That's some deep insight. Yeah, because like I would use that phrase and be like, okay, he's gonna get me through it, and I would still have that same.
That's a different, but that's a different phrase though. Like that, I think is a different. It's a totally different.
It is. Yeah. So I know it's like definitely different, but like the perspective, like you said, is like, okay, I will get through it rather than like God will like take me through it. Like that's the 2 points of view.
Yeah, that's the reason why I don't like that phrase. It's meant to be encouraging and it's meant to be supportive, but it comes off as like also kind of minimizing in its own way, where it's like if someone's going through a true life-altering crisis, to tell them, that God's not going to give you more than they could handle. It's like, oh, well, the reason why you're not handling this is because you're not, doing enough to handle it, because God clearly wouldn't give you something that was beyond your ability to handle. So it must be your fault. The
last one maybe I have that I've heard a lot in the Christian world is love the sinner, hate the sin. Is that a cliche?
I think it is. I think it's a cliche insofar as like it's a very surface level thought that often comes up in like conversations about sin and identity. When like, yes, at a plain level, like we are supposed to love the sinner and hate the sin, but practically applying that is very difficult. It's very challenging to do that well, especially with a sinner loves their sin and is identifying their sin as the thing that's most important to them. Like because then at that point it's like the sin and the sinner become intertangled into one thing. And so I like the phrase by itself. It's often used as a magic wand to dismiss having to think too deeply about like how practically to
Right, or to be critical of anyone, or confront people.
Yes. And it's like, okay, sin does not exist without sinners. Like, so if you hate sin, you have to deal with sinners, which is exactly what Christ came to do. Christ, who did love the sinner and hate the sin perfectly, came to deal with sin by dealing with sinners. So you can't use that as a get out of jail free card of having to avoid confronting someone about their sin or dealing with sin in this kind of abstract way. Like, sin does not exist apart from sinners.
Yeah, no, that's really good insight. What's top of mind for you in the tech world that you're like, okay, is this real? I'm curious.
I want to know, and maybe this is more of a marketing thing than a tech thing. That could be an interesting conversation for another time of like the overlap of like marketing lingo and tech lingo. But it seems like in everything I see in the tech world, it's all about the future. Like, the future of this, the future of that. The future is coming. And maybe that's just marketing. Like, maybe that's just marketing language and it's totally, totally innocuous or whatever. But I hear it so often that it just kind of is like, oh, okay, but like, why is everything the future? Like,
wow. Yeah, no, I think the future is now, let's say, I think is like a phrase. Right. Is that like even like Steve Jobs or someone being like, look, we've arrived. I think that's like the sentiment. It's like trying to drive because, and I like, part of me is trying to understand, like, is this not a common thought outside of the tech world? But in the tech world, you're building the future, right?
Yes.
You're like, building towards some moment where you can take a step back and be like, okay, we have created it. So that phrase is often used to kind of explain that progress of innovation, where it's like the future has now become the present.
Okay.
Which, because it's like the future is always like it's something in the future. It's always tomorrow, right? Tomorrow never comes, or tomorrow never dies, whatever the James Bond phrase is. But yeah, I think that term just helps get people to pause and be like, what is the future? And like, what are we building towards? Yeah. That's a cliche. I believe it inside my heart that like we're building the future.
Right. And I like, again, like with all cliches, there is an element of truth to where like, yes, you are building something that in the future is going to exist that doesn't presently exist now. So in a meaningful sense, you are like working on the future or doing something for the future or something that will take place in the future. But it seems like in the cliche, in the tech world, like everything is about this amorphous, nebulous future because today isn't good enough.
Yeah, no, there's something there. It's like, I don't know if this is necessarily true, but tech is really about progress, right? And it's like there's this like upstream river that we're going up with the boat, and you have to like keep advancing. There's like this inherent like push to be like, you have to advance or you'll just like fall into being commoditized or being like yesterday's news. So it really is, there's an element there. And I don't know if that's just not normal in like other spheres. We probably are more future obsessed than the average person.
Well, but to your point though, like I don't think the impulse to like, you always got to be building, you always got to be moving, you always got to be, this stream of progress. Like I don't think that's exactly unique to tech. I think that exists in every sphere in its own right. Another like I would call this a cliche, and it's true in tech and true in marketing. It would be like we got to scale up. We got to scale up our work.
Scale
again.
Yeah.
Again. Truthful phrase. Just gets used for everything. To where like progress becomes the goal of our work. To where if we're not progressing, we're not doing what we are supposed to be doing.
So I am curious, like when you internalize the phrase, the word scale in maybe two phrases of like, does this scale? And also do things that don't scale. There are actually like two paradigms here.
Yes.
what do you interpret that as? Like, why do people, you think, originally say that and stuff?
I think it's a cliche because it is a helpful phrase. When you talk about like scaling up, you're talking like, is there a way to do more of this good thing? And then things that don't scale, uh, things that for one reason or another are very difficult to do more of, which is a baseline problem and challenge for everyone in every industry ever. It's like, how do we do more of the good things that are worth for us to do? And then how do we minimize the things that we can't do more of or shouldn't try to do more of? And to just like cliches, just to get super meta here, like cliches are so helpful because they pack in just so much idea and so much information into a single phrase, which is what allows them to get used for so many different things that they've kind of become meaningless terms. They're so condensed in how much they capture, how much words and ideas they contain, that they get used for everything. And so like the language of scaling is like, it's a simple term to navigate very human problems about work and doing more work and what kinds of work. It's just easier to talk about scaling.
It's like, I think, definite, like the definition of words, I don't know if the right word is etymology or something. That's
etymology.
So it's like the phrase scale can mean one thing, like, your scale, like a ruler, right? Or like a weighing scale, right? You're like measuring it. But then, for people in tech, it's often about, and maybe it's more business, it's like, how easy is it to make this a repeatable thing where your effort is minimized and your revenue or payback is like maximized? And that's often of like, can this scale? Because it's like, if someone builds something, but it was like a one-off masterpiece that you cannot like, carve a sculpture. It's like, that doesn't scale, where the more you build, the more the costs go down and the more margin you can make, right? So that's like typically how it is. But then the antonym of like do things that don't scale is that it's going to be very hard for you to figure out what the scaling vectors are for a problem until you just like do the dirty work and figure out how to make a product and like solve the outcome and the goal. And then you're like, okay, how do I rethink this to also make it scalable by accomplishing the same tasks? At least that's how I've been using it in my own life, is like, do things that don't scale, figure out how to like solve the problem, and then it's like re-architect it for scale.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And it's interesting too that like this is not. I was thinking about this too. Like it's not just a tech thing. Like we can see some of this idea even in scripture where Jesus is when Jesus is putting the Pharisees on blast. He talks about how they'll scour the whole land just to make one convert. They'll travel the whole region just to make one more Pharisee out of them. And then, but Jesus in the parable of the sower describes
like, you got to scale.
Jesus talks about like there are some that will bear, there are some seeds that will bear 30, 60, 100-fold fruit. Like it's not evenly distributed. So there's a way of like thinking about scaling, of like fulfilling our mandate to work and to have dominion and to do that well and to gain mastery in that. And this is what mastery looks like when you're able to scale this in a successful way.
Yeah. The other, and like for the cliche, it's not a phrase, but like scale, it's like a word of like pivot, I think is also so commonly used. I mean, if you watch any of like the shows like Silicon Valley and stuff, I feel like everyone knows what pivot is. But it's also like, I think so true of like, you need to be able to pivot. And it almost like represents a larger concept of like, you need to be able to not hold your ideas so dear and accept new information when you receive that, and then change your thesis, change your perspective. And it's like being able to pivot allows you to, let's say, survive, versus like holding too tightly to your original notions can end up in being like, well, you're going bankrupt because this is never going to actually work.
Yeah.
So it's like, I often will use that phrase like, okay, we're pivoting this, we got to do this. but I think it like commonly is like, oh, you're just saying pivot, but you don't really know what you're doing. But
Right.
it's like, yeah, you're iterating.
Yeah, like pivot to me doesn't strike me as a cliche outright, but it is like a very common word where you could use like changing direction or like iterating, like you said,
Yeah.
or like it 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 tries to capture like every type of shift possible when it may not actually be a pivot. Like changing, like a small change is not a pivot. In my mind, a pivot is like, okay, we were locked in on this long-term strategy that for whatever
Yeah, you
reason
completely
we have
change
to
direction.
completely change to something different. That's a pivot. But
Yeah.
a small scale everyday decision, it's like, no, that's not a pivot. You're just doing something different, and that's
Adjusting
okay.
course a little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting.
tweaking things.
Yeah. I'm recently rereading Amusing Ourselves to Death by
I am
Postman.
so proud of you.
And yeah, he gets really into the meaning of like words and like the written language and all of that type of stuff. So it is interesting to discuss these words and how they convey meaning, which is obviously different than like images. Yeah,
but I think
and
it's
actually
also
go ahead. Yeah.
well, I think it's also important too for us to talk about cliches because we have different spheres that we work and live in. We have a common interest in tech, but we are living and operating in very different spheres adjacent to tech. You are a tech practitioner proper. I'm someone who writes a lot about tech, but works in the church world. And so one of the ways that we could better communicate with each other is to like identify those really silly phrases that just fly off our mouth without a second thought, that the other person may be like, what did you just say? Like what does that mean?
What does that really mean?
Like cliches are in-house terms that don't translate well outside the house. And so if we want to have more productive conversations about Christianity and tech, if that's what we want to do with this podcast, we have to actually tackle like the phrases of the verbiage that we use that we assume everybody knows, but maybe don't.
Yeah. I mean, literally today, I just learned what square the circle was. I was like, I've heard that, but I don't actually understand.
I don't think I know what that means. You should enlighten
me.
It's
a more rare like business term of like, and apparently it goes back to, I don't know if it was like historical or like philosophical of like a circle and a square are two distinct shapes. So you're asking someone to do the impossible by turning a circle into a square. So it's like we're going to have to do the impossible maybe is kind of what it's supposed to be. Maybe, I don't know, but do people always use that way? I don't know.
This will definitely be a good follow-up episode. I think this is something we should do again here in the future, because I think there's more cliches that we didn't have time to touch on. Like doing life together is a huge thing in my world, or being intentional is a huge thing in my world. A lot more cliches for us to cover, but if you've been listening to What Would Jesus Tech up to this point, we want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to Joel and I talk about cliches, and we hope that this conversation was helpful for you in thinking about your own work and how you discuss your work with others. What Would Jesus Tech is a listener-supported podcast. We don't run ads, and we want to keep it that way, but we can't do that without your help. If you want to keep this show a pleasant, ad-free listening experience, you should consider becoming a Patreon of the show. We'll have a link for that in the show notes. You do get special perks. You do get special benefits. We just put out a bonus episode on Severance and a lengthy discussion of that. And I will say, as someone who's been podcasting for well over a decade at this point, one of my all-time favorite episodes I have ever done on anything ever. But it's a Patreon exclusive. So if you want to check that out, you should consider becoming a patron and get access to that. We also have a free WWJT Discord. If you want more conversations about words, we have a lot of conversations about words in that Discord. And it is totally free. You don't have to be a patron to get in the Discord. You can talk to me, to Joel, to Andrew, our other co-host who couldn't be here today. It's an awesome place of people that are super chill and us talking through and working through things that are happening in the tech world, how to apply tech to our circumstances and our faith. Link for that in the show notes as well. This has been What Would Jesus Tech? Use tech, find rest, and glorify God. Y'all have a great day.
See ya.